Thank you very much, Jeffrey. Hi, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here. Thanks, Jeffrey. And I don't know what he said, but I'm sure it was something really nice. I don't know any Taiwan language. Anyway, tonight maybe after you can teach me a little bit. Thank you so much for coming. I know it's somebody's wedding anniversary, so she'll be leaving after 15 minutes. And it's not my wedding anniversary, so I'll stay. I'm going to talk about diversity tonight, but before I start talking about diversity in finance and why it matters, I thought I would give you a little bit of context about the type of research that I do and why I'm doing the research in the first place, because this is the first time we've met. And I started doing what's called rich thinking. Where's that? This way. Rich thinking research in 2010. And rich thinking research, all it is me interviewing 50 women around the world every year on one question related to women and money. And I came up with the idea to do this because in 2009, the financial crisis, I was working as a portfolio manager, and my clients weren't very happy because nobody was making any money. It was a bad environment, as any of you know that were working at that time. And so I thought I would do some reading in my spare time because nobody wanted to talk to me. So I started reading about women in finance because I'd always had a lot of female clients, more than male clients. I had couples, but a lot of female clients. And everything that I read when I was scouring through consulting houses, research, and bank websites seemed like the messages were really negative about women, like women are afraid to invest, and women won't take risk, and women would prefer not to be interested in anything to do with investing. Maybe they would get their brothers or their fathers to do it, but they wouldn't do their own investing. And I thought, that seemed really disconnected to my day-to-day life where I was dealing with all of these female clients that were very strong and confident and capable at investing. So that's when I came up with the idea that maybe I should do some research and share some more positive stories to inspire the next generations. And that's exactly what's happened. So I decided I would do one paper in 2010, and I interviewed 50 very accomplished women around the world because I thought if I interviewed the really, really successful women, they would have a successful, strong story about money, and I would share that. And so each year now, on International Women's Day, I issue one white paper with 50 quotes from 50 women around the world. And it's just kind of taken on a life of its own. And I've been fortunate in that the story has really resonated globally, actually. And I think tonight is the 40th talk I will have done for a CFA society. I've been all over the place. I've also spoken to many banks around the world, particularly in the Nordic countries, who seem to really embrace my rich thinking research on women and money. So that gives you a little bit of background. On top of rich thinking, I got so obsessed by doing research on women and money that I ended up quitting my job as a portfolio manager 3 years ago, so that I could focus exclusively on doing this type of qualitative research because I really felt that there was a need for it in the marketplace. And so in the last 3 years, I've done a research report for Danske Bank, which is a big bank in the Nordics. I interviewed 60 of their ultra high net worth female customers and found out what they wanted and all of the trends that they were seeing in terms of what they should be offering to these very wealthy women. Last year I did State Street out of Boston. I interviewed another 60 male and female CEOs around the world, and that paper was on the topic of the purpose of the investment management industry. What are we here to do, and how is it evolving? And that paper's coming out in June. And then I also did, of course, just through being at all the CFA societies, that's research, many, many different focus groups, and then this rich thinking, and also some venture capital research as well. So with all of this, I feel like my brain is just exploding with knowledge about women and money, and also men and money, because I have interviewed a lot of men along the way. So now, the topic tonight is one of my favorites, and we hear this word all of the time, and a lot of people are getting pretty bored of the word, frankly, because there have been so many reports issued. I think everyone in this room has probably read enough by now to know that there is a conclusive business case for diversity, and I'm not going to talk about that tonight, because I think you've all read everything there is on it. What I think that I can do tonight, based on me wandering around the world interviewing people, is I'm hoping I can share some stories that I hear from the street, if you will. So call this sort of real life stories. Why do people in corporations care about diversity? What's going on really in real life? Forget about what you're reading about. So I'll just share some of the people that I've interviewed and why they think diversity in finance, or diversity in any profession, is important. And of course, diversity refers to not just gender diversity. I happen to be an expert in women in finance, so my talk will be skewed more towards women in finance tonight. But of course, we're talking about diversity of everything. Race, religion, sexuality, and even personality is huge. So when I was doing that State Street, am I in a good place here? Or should I keep walking around? I just want to make sure everybody can see. When I was doing that State Street research, State Street Bank out of Boston last year, interviewing CEOs, I was asking them about the purpose of the investment management industry and what do you think is most relevant, what's going on today. And so one of the people that I spoke to, who was running a huge pension fund in Montreal, she said to me, you know, we talk a lot here, not just about gender diversity, but also diversity of style, meaning in your personality, what kind of person are you? Are you really outgoing and extroverted, or are you kind of shy and introverted? You could be, of course, brilliant in any way that you want, and we're all different. We're all different in the way we express ourselves. And she said that she felt strongly that in this very large pension fund where she worked and was on the management team, that they didn't pay enough attention to that, and that they were only rewarding the portfolio managers who had these wonderful personalities and were very likable, very extroverted characters. And when you think about it, that's true. We're attracted to these types of good personalities. But on the other hand, some of the portfolio managers were incredibly good at their work and just as valuable, if not more so. But because they weren't going out at night entertaining other people and becoming more and more popular, they weren't getting the right attention within the firm. So I think that's just one good example and a great quote that I had on that we need to, let's say, make room for maybe more shy, introverted personalities, people that could be equally good at their jobs. It's not just one big popularity contest, right? Now I want to step back a bit and talk about women just in terms of the broader trends that we're seeing. This graph is from the World Bank in 2014, and it's the ratio of the female to male participation in the labor force. And obviously this has been on the rise globally. And when I look at East Asia and Pacific, which is the light blue line here, you can see that it is now, and it has been increasing over the years, it's now closed any gap and really is in line with any of the other developed countries. So that's probably not news to you, but I thought I would just share that. And when I look at the Taiwan labor force participation rate, this is from 1978 to very recently. We can see here, it used to be a huge gap between men and women, close to 80% men and only 40% for women way back in 78. And then as you've seen, big progress being made, women are the green line, until about 2006. And then we've sort of stalled out since then. Not much has happened in the female labor force since 2006. I'm not sure why. It's kind of stuck at 50%. So it's now about 50% women, 68% men, kind of holding. I'd like to share some of my knowledge about the corporate role models that I'm seeing around the world today. I didn't used to have any, and over the last 2 or 3 years, I now have quite a number of them, so I'll be sharing a few stories with you. This is a report that you can download, and I would highly recommend it if it's of interest to you. It's produced by the French firm called Sodexo. This is the absolute best research I have seen on diversity anywhere that I've been around the world. And I've read, I think, just about everything. I had the opportunity to interview the CEO of this firm, Michel Landel, when I was at Deauville Women's Forum a couple of years ago, and I interviewed him on stage, and he talked about this report. They interviewed 50,000, they surveyed rather than interviewed, 50,000 employees in the firm across all areas of the firm, every type of work, all levels of management. And they found out conclusively that the most optimal balance for gender diversity would be 40 to 60% women across all areas to lead to superior business performance. So 50,000 employees, it's a huge conclusive survey. He said anything under 40% wasn't as good, and anything over 60% women wasn't as good. So you want to be in that range of 40 to 60%. This lady, Diana van Maastek, I met in Amsterdam. Very interesting what's going on, because we're seeing with that information now that people know that they need more gender equal workforces. Diane decided that there was a huge opportunity in the marketplace, and she would build a research resort for gender equality funds, because she realized that more and more people wanted to actually invest in the concept of gender equality. And certainly in that Nordic research I did last year for Danske Bank, the number one thing that the ultra high net worth women wanted to invest in was a gender equality fund. And none existed even 2 or 3 years ago, if you can believe it. And there's a lot more available, even in the last 6 months, it's really increased. So Diana founded this firm called Equity, and they rank 3,000 companies around the world based on 19 different criteria of gender equality. And so it's really rigorous research and quite a huge database. And she's signed on already so many major companies since she started in the last year and a half. You can see that the demand is there. And she licenses the data so that any banks can form their own index funds based on her ranking of which companies are compliant with gender equality. I met with Paul Harderson. He's in Reykjavik, which is a cool place. If you've never been there, really fun. He's the president of the NASDAQ Stock Exchange of Iceland. And I asked him what he thought about diversity in finance and why it matters. And he said his job, heading up the stock exchange, is to think about how do we get a better functioning marketplace in general. And he feels that he needs that participation from women just to have a better functioning marketplace, that it's common sense to him. And actually in Iceland, you've probably heard, they are the highest in the OECD ranking for percentage of female participation in the workforce. They are 79% women in the workforce versus 50% global average. And there's a lot of reasons for that, which is a story for another day. I met this lady, and she in Dublin, she runs Vodafone there, a telecom company. And she told me a funny story about having been on a panel talking about diversity in finance with a couple of other CEOs that were male. And she said one of the male CEOs was saying, well, diversity is really, really important because there's an economic payoff if we put women on boards and in management. And she decided to challenge him, and she stood up and said, well, are you saying that if there wasn't an economic argument for diversity, that we would just continue not worrying about women? And I guess it became a little bit of a thing in the media. They had a bit of a tussle on stage. They worked it out, but essentially the point that she was trying to make was it's about the right thing to do rather than just about what women will contribute financially. Diversity to her and to many people today is it's simply the right thing to do. This guy is in Stockholm, Sweden, Per Eriksson. Everyone's named Per in Sweden, by the way, if you've been there. Every woman is named Anna, and every man is named Per, just about. He's the CEO of a company called NetEnt, and NetEnt is in the gaming industry, and that's of course one of the traditionally most male-dominated techie kind of industries there is. And I talked to him 4 years ago, and he said the objective of his firm was to have a 50-50 mix of men and women by the year 2020. And here we are a year away, and he's just about there. And I asked him why was that so important in this techie, gamification business, and he said, well, actually, we've realized that women ask much different questions. And we feel that with these types of questions that this will lead to smarter decision making as a company. I don't know if any of you have heard of Pocket Sun. She's getting a bit famous now. She's based in Singapore. I met her a couple of years ago. She was only 23, and she's now been on the cover of Forbes at such a young age. She decided after studying in the States at one of the great schools there, she looked at the statistics on venture capital, and she said she was just stunned that only 2.2% of venture capital funding in the world goes to women. And she was so shocked and upset that she decided, okay, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to found my own VC firm and make those numbers change. So I'm actually going to see her again next week in Singapore. And if you want an inspiring story, just Google Pocket Sun and read all about her success. I don't know how old she is now, maybe 25 or 26. It's a great story. Last example of a corporate role model, this is Henrik Nyberg. He's the CEO of Nordnet, also a company in Sweden. Nordnet is the largest online bank in the Nordic countries. And he was running the company. It was mostly male-dominated 3-4 years ago. And he said what happened was the following. The marketing department put out a really glossy brochure, and on the cover of the brochure there were 9 men, all between the age of 35 and 45, all really good looking, all looked very similar, just like each other, 35 years old, whatever, cover, looked great for Nordnet. They sent it out in the mail to all their clients. He got one in the mail on a Friday. He thought the brochure looked great. He was really proud of it. And then on Saturday morning, over the weekend, he received an email, and the subject title of the email was, "What were you thinking?" And the email was from one of the largest clients of this online bank, a 64-year-old woman who looked at the brochure when it came to her house, and she went, why is all my money in this bank when all they're putting on the cover is these 9 young guys that look the same as each other? And so for Hakan, he told me this was his moment, like, aha. He realized he had to change his entire company. And I mean, this is a major client, and she couldn't be the only one that was offended by this brochure. So he hired McKinsey consultants, of course, and they did a huge study, and they ended up focusing on how can we get in the next 2 years at least half of the company female versus male. And they did it. They are now a 50-50 company, threw the whole business model up in the air. Quite a story. So I call this the corporate gender spectrum. And if we look at sort of how companies have been run historically, and there have been, of course, traditional masculine behaviors and traditional feminine behaviors. Obviously, we're all somewhere between, whether we're men or women. But in the past, the mode or the mean of how the companies would operate was always more towards the traditional masculine style of communication and behavior. And now today, we're seeing that the mode or the medium of what kind of behavior are we exhibiting, it's very much moved much more to kind of a center of gravity, if you will, being more of a balance between traditional masculine and traditional feminine behaviors. And I would go so far to say that as we move into the future, any company that hasn't figured this out yet is probably not going to do well in business much longer for so many reasons. going to shift a little bit and talk more about my own research in terms of this concept of diversity in finance. Smart women truly are today's #1 target market. And these are women that have money, and you know all the stats on that already, so I'm not going to read that to you. But it's incredibly important for anyone in business because all of us have customers of one form or another. All of us are selling something, whether we like it or not. And so if she's our #1 customer most of the time, we better spend more time figuring out how does she communicate, how does she think, and how does she behave, and then we can all do a better job of servicing this customer. By the way, I write for CFA Institute for the Enterprising Investor. I've written a lot of articles for them, and one of them, and this topics of interest, I wrote maybe a year ago. It's all on their site about daughter care and why this is important. The over 65 category now globally is a massive part of the population. These people that are over 65 historically didn't have large investment portfolios. They felt fortunate if they'd grown up in the Great Depression or World War II, thank you. They felt fortunate if they owned their own home. They didn't have an investment portfolio. But now what we're seeing happen is these older people, 65 plus, the homes that they bought for tens of thousands of dollars, they're now selling for over $1 million. So guess what? They now do have a big investment portfolio. And because women live longer than men on average, what's happening is we're seeing all of these older women sitting on all this money, this investment portfolio, and they probably didn't get the skills throughout their life. They don't have the competency to invest for themselves. So what happens? They ask their daughters, because usually it's the daughters that take care of elder care. And now investment management is actually forming part of elder care, if you think about it. So when we have clients, if we're investment advisors, we need to make sure the daughters and the sons, ideally, are in all the meetings and completely understand, because they're going to end up a lot of the time managing this investment portfolio for the older person. Think about it. Yes?
Is this regional specific or is it worldwide?
Worldwide. Yeah. Pretty interesting. So we need to know what matters to be smart women, and that's what I've been researching for the last 9 years. I've done 9 reports. Now this one, the red one in the corner, just came out on International Women's Day recently. All of these are on my site. They're available to look at for free. Every year I ask only one question because I like to keep the conversation really open-ended, and that way I find that you get all of that diversity of thought, and I talk to women of all different ages, all different cultures, all different professions. And so I'm going to share the highlights of what I found out. It's really hard to do this in such a short time, but I'm going to give you the highlights because I'm hoping that if you're not sure how to incorporate, how to better communicate with female clients, whether we're analysts or advisors, we could all probably use a little bit more help. And so it might provoke some extra questions you could be asking your clients. The dominant theme that I've seen over the years is the one of financial independence. Through all my travels and conversations with these women, they all talk to me about how important it is that they feel that they can make their own decisions and they can make their own money. This is a perfect example. Cheryl Raisin, she runs a legal practice based in New York for one of the largest biotech firms. And she said, my father ingrained in me and my sister the need for what he called FU money. And that is, of course, money that gives you the freedom to walk away from any situation that you don't like. So if you don't like your boss or you're not happy in your relationship, you've got your FU money. And that was good advice. And so a lot of women feel this way. This lady I met last year here in Taipei, Annie Hung, She's the CFO of Asia Pacific Telecom, and I talked to her about what was most important to her in terms of taking risk and everything else, and she said, you know, the best risk she ever took was deciding to become educated in finance. And I love what she said. She said, I'm convinced that you have to be financially independent, otherwise it's very difficult to say that you're in any way independent. Matters. So if you're looking to get a woman, a female customer, to invest in a product or an idea, financial or otherwise, this is the wrong way to do it. I love this slide because I think the industry for so many years communicated this way to both male and female clients, essentially just saying the same thing over and over and over again. Stocks outperform bonds over the long run, you need to be invested in stocks. Well, that makes a lot of sense, the rates of return, but then why weren't women investing if it made so much sense? Because it didn't resonate with them. It didn't really hold a lot of meaning with them. So some women felt guilty that they weren't investing, and some women felt really stupid that they weren't investing, but they were too busy running their lives and doing other things, and the message just wasn't resonating. So we need a new style of communication. And so what my research has shown is that definitely over 73% of women said to me that they learned about money when they were growing up through informal communication with friends and family, real life stories, anybody that gave them a message when they were growing up about money, that hit them here and it shaped the way they felt about money for the rest of their lives. And so these very accomplished women that are confident handling money matters, somebody along the way took the time to give them a good message about money and it really helped them. So if we're communicating in the business world with women, I know that we would prefer to hear stories, case studies, even quotes. Podcasts, of course, are huge now. Video clips, anything that's kind of a real life situation she'll respond to. I also know that women prefer to invest in causes and concerns that matter to them. It could be anything. Today, of course, ESG, environmental stuff is extremely important, especially to the women I interviewed in the Nordics. But the interesting thing about ESG is, of course, these products are actually more volatile and more risky, if you will, than other products. But as long as it's important to a woman and it resonates with her values, she won't mind taking the risk. She doesn't care as much about whether it's a 3.5% return or a 3.8% return. That's not so relevant. It's what am I actually investing in and why? This is some interesting data that I found. Capital Group is the source from October a couple of years ago. They did a study of what men and women investors want in 5 categories: conservative investments, funds that cushion losses, funds that beat the market, investments that promote opportunity for women, minorities, diverse groups, investments that promote health and wellness of consumers and employees. So take a look at this chart. Women are orange. You can see that in the first 3, which are the ones that are most talked about still in the media. Oh, everybody says women are so conservative. Well, actually, if you look, there's only like a 1 or 2 point difference. Men and women are both liking conservative investments. There's not that much difference here, but this is what gets all the airplay. If you look at where the significant differences are between men and women, 15 to 20 point differences, women want investment opportunities that promote diversity, and they also want investments that promote health and wellness. Big change. So clearly I have found out, although there are still so many stereotypes out there with what we read, women are not risk averse. In fact, they are risk aware. And it might sound like a subtle difference in language, but I really feel it's an important one. Number 1, I like to share positive messages, and it is positive that a woman is risk aware. What I've found through my research is that a woman may take a little longer to make an investment decision. She's going to do her homework. She's going to do all the homework, but then she will take calculated risk. And again, ESG funds and all of that are so interesting to women definitely have higher risk associated with them. So it's not a problem for a woman to take risk. This is a really interesting study. You should definitely have a look. I have it on my LinkedIn. I posted it on LinkedIn a couple of days ago, so please connect with me if you want. I'm always posting on my favorite topic here. But this is really new research. It hasn't even been picked up by the media yet. I love this so much. I sent a letter to the author the other day, and I'm going to meet him in Washington next month. It's called Gender, Learning, and Overconfidence: Why Females Create More Accurate Earnings Estimates. And I won't go into the whole thing, but basically what they did is they took a crowdsourced site where both male and female amateurs and professionals posted earnings estimates reports. Thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of them. And when they looked at the data of the amateurs, the female earnings estimates were twice as accurate as the males. What was more interesting to me was for the first year, the earnings estimates were equally accurate between the male and female. And after the first year is when the women's became twice as accurate. And that's the fascinating reading here. And essentially they said it's because women are more willing to learn from their mistakes. So in the first year, everybody's on the same level, and the men were overconfident. And so after the first year, they weren't learning as much because they just assumed they were doing the right thing. Very interesting. Anyway, I could talk about that one all day. And I like it because we haven't seen any study on overconfidence or gender in a long, long time. I came up with my own geeky equation. Yes, sorry.
Excuse me, for the results, is the money for their own money or the money as a fund?
It's both. It's open to everybody. So it's professional and amateur, and everybody. You got to read this report. Wild. So this is what I think when it comes to women and money. If a woman is interested and if the idea is aligned with her values and holds some meaning to her, then absolutely she will take risk and invest, whether it's investing in a product, in her own idea, in her business, whatever it is. So the job of the salesperson is to figure that out and to spend a lot more time talking about what are you interested in and why. What's important to you in your life, in your family, a lot more time, and then you'll have an easier time getting them to actually invest. Now I want to talk a bit about why women need finance, and essentially it's because in today's environment, of course, every industry is the finance industry, every industry is the digital industry. If you want to call yourself an expert in any job, you can't just know that job anymore. You really need to know a bit about everything. And so I'll give you some examples of some of the women I've met that even though they don't work in finance, they've started studying finance. And that's why I think the CFA designation will become even more popular. We need it. Today's Wetterby, she's essentially tech sales for Microsoft in Sweden. Young woman, about 33 years old. I was talking to her and she said, you know, in her job in sales, she wanted to differentiate herself from her competitors. She wanted to have deeper conversations with her clients. If you were trying to sell a mainframe computer 30 years ago, it would have been all about talking about the technology. But today, nobody talks about the technology. It's really just a tool, it's just a business tool. So it's more important to understand the strategic objectives of the client. And so as she said, her competitors didn't understand how to read a balance sheet. And she thought, if I could understand how to read a balance sheet, I would get a better understanding of the customer's strategic objectives and do a better job selling Microsoft equipment to them and software. So she went and studied finance at night. And now she's one of their top tech salespeople. Gabrielle is a similar story. She's in the digital art space, Attraction Images, award-winning video company in Montreal. She started out doing really well. They kept promoting her. Then they said, we need you to manage a team. Then they said, we need you to manage a P&L, something that she was terrified by because she had never studied finance. So another example, women decided to get ahead in my own career. I have no choice. I'm at this level. Now I need to run a P&L. She went back to school at night, studied finance, doing really well. Here in Taipei, Annie Lin, Deloitte, my husband's with Deloitte as well, and I was with this woman last night, telecom media leader. She said to her it was a very risky decision to study business because her parents wanted her to be a doctor or a lawyer, and I hear this a lot in these parts of the world. And she said, so she decided to go against the grain, and even her friends weren't studying business, and she did. And I love what she said. She said, you know, business is about real life, and I can make an impact on the profitability of companies. So every industry is the finance industry. Now, what have I seen that I think works? There's sort of 5 categories that I'll tell you about. By the way, if anyone wants to interrupt with questions, we can, or we can hold them till the end. Up to you. Okay. Culture matters. Quotas, that's really, really controversial, but I'll tell you what I think. HR policies matter. Make it visual. That's about role models and all that good stuff. And social media has changed the game entirely for women. So, environment, let's talk about culture. Terence O'Dean, you might have heard of him. He wrote that famous, talking about overconfidence, that thing, it was called Gender something. Boys Will Be Boys. It was written in something like 1990 or 1991. And it talked about that overconfidence thing. He's a professor at the University of California, Berkeley. And I talked to him about environment and culture, and he said, you know, the first time he walked into a trading room, he thought about how unappealing it was. And I did work in a trading room. I traded foreign currency for 5 years when I was in my 30s, and I thought it was a crazy environment. I actually liked it. So whether you're a man or a woman, I think, doesn't really matter. But first of all, he said, traditionally, men used to ignore environments, and they'd just go in with their eyes closed and go, I'm here to make money. That's it. I'm doing this job. I don't care about the environment. I'm here to make money. Whereas a woman wouldn't feel exactly that way. She's more inclined to walk into a room, take a look around, and go, is this a reasonable place to be? Is this where I want to go every day? So unreasonable, you know, a woman's not going to be attracted to this type of bro culture environment. Some are very reasonable. I did a study for this venture capital firm. If you go on their website, Kensington Capital in Toronto, actually, you can see people that look entirely different on their website, every single one of them, from somewhere different, all ages, all genders, everything. And it really struck me. And in fact, I wrote a report about that because I considered them to be a corporate role model for diversity in that space of venture capital, which is renowned for having no women or people from other cultures. Another thing that really works, in my view, and I'm looking at numbers here, I want to show you this. It's controversial because nobody really wants to have to put quotas in place if we can avoid it. People want to be promoted based on merit, of course. But if we look at this study from 2013 to 2016, a 3-year period, in the UK, they decided to have a target of 30% women on boards. And in Norway, they decided they would have a quota, a mandated 40% of women on boards. And so what happened over the 3 years is you had, yes, everybody moved up, whether it was a target or a quota, but you had an absolute advantage, even though the UK started at a much lower starting point. you had a 7-point absolute advantage versus a 5-point for Norway, and that's because they had quotas. So it works. And you have this thing here going on in the world. This was in Canada, where our government decided on a dime, just one day, actually we had no idea. We woke up one morning and half the cabinet was women. The Prime Minister just decided, today's the day, we're doing it, big change. So I see this has major implications if you think about it as research analysts, equity analysts. What else could change suddenly because of diversity? A lot, and it can change overnight. So just like Mr. Trudeau decided this, any corporation based on peer pressure, based on changes in the economy, whatever, could suddenly decide, like my guy at Nordnet, we need 50% women, now. And then what happens? The valuations of the company change. People say, and research has shown, more women will make more money, share prices might go up. It will affect the way that we value companies. HR policies, also very important and effective. This is Sweden. I love walking around there because during the day I see men walking with the baby carriages. Why? They have mandatory paternity and maternity leave, both equal, 9 months each. It's quite different from anywhere else around the world, and it's really, really effective because back to that OECD percentage of women in the labor force and the participation rate, the global average is 50%. Sweden is 70.2% women. All the women were, just about all the women, because they've got somebody else taking care of the baby and the rest of them. The other thing that works, as I said, is making it visible. So what do I mean by that? I met a woman in Las Vegas who's a forensic scientist. And actually I met her in a restaurant. She was sitting at a table with a whole bunch of people. They were there for a conference. And I went over to ask them what the conference was because I noticed they were largely women. There were all kinds of women and one man at this big table. And she said, oh, we're forensic scientists. We're here for a conference. And I said, excuse me, but it seems like you're all women. What's going on with that? And she said, yeah, in the DNA unit of the Las Vegas Police Department, out of 31 forensic scientists, 30 are women. And it's the CSI effect, the show. She said it actually made it look cool. And so all of these women were really attracted to going into it. And that struck me so hard because I think of what we're trying to do to attract more women into the finance industry. And we haven't done this yet, and we need to make it sexy, fun, exciting to be a woman in finance. So I think we're gonna, well, I think the CFA Institute has started doing some better ads in this vein, but we're not quite there yet. But it's amazing what making it visual will do. And the last sort of thing that totally works is social media, which I'm happy to be living in this time, and it's certainly changed the world for me as well, to have a voice and to be able to distribute all kinds of research and information. So we've seen amazing things happen even in the last 5 years. So social media led to crowdsourcing led to crowdfunding, and crowdfunding has led to the democratization of capital. And it's that democratization of capital that's the magic for women. We see sites like Poems. Have you heard of this one? It's out of Singapore. When I was speaking to CFA Singapore last year, about 40% of the people in the room said they were doing their own trading online on this social platform. And I was looking around for Taiwan information, and I couldn't find social trading platforms here. Do you have them? Or online trading? Not yet? Okay, I would like to talk with you more about that after for my own research. But these sites all around the world, I'm going to give you a few examples right now. This has helped everyone. So if anybody has what I call a financial knowledge gap, even when you're working with your customers, they can go online and take video tutorials. And there's such a natural demand everywhere now for financial education. It just makes it easy, especially for a woman who wants to work from home or who wants to study from wherever. whenever she feels like it. These are excellent sites to go on. This woman I interviewed in New York last year, Kiana Daniel, she grew up in Iran and she decided to study electrical engineering in Japan, and she couldn't afford her tuition, so she started trading foreign currency. True story. Made a lot of money, supported herself, paid all her tuition, and set up an online FX trading site. Absolutely inspirational for younger women. It's based in Japan and New York now. You can go on the site called Invest Diva and learn how to trade and follow her trades and set up your own accounts and all of the stuff. And interestingly, with the younger generation of women, from millennials and younger, they are now bragging about their trading. They will post and tweet pictures of themselves holding a new Prada bag they bought with their foreign currency trading profits. It's really become a thing. It's very fun. And even in Japan, you may have heard of the other demographic, the sort of more traditional housewives. 25% of the retail foreign currency trading is done by women in Japan. And a lot of them are housewives that are kind of doing it when they feel like it. It's exciting. This is Israel. I was there for a couple of weeks ago, and eToro is the world's largest social trading platform. So it's just about investing online, either on your own or in a group. This is a Canadian company, Volio. By the way, I'm happy to share my slides. I see some of you are taking pictures. No problem at all if you want to be able to go and look up some of these sites after. My Volio was developed as a way, it's an investment club idea. So rather than forming a physical investment club where you go and meet people, you can actually set up accounts online with your old MBA class or your friends or family, and you can all invest in the same portfolio. And you can know whether your stock picks are doing better than the other guy's stock picks, keeps track of performance as individual and as the investment club. And online trading is the best way to build confidence and practice, so it's just great for everyone. I met with Christy Ross, the CEO of Tasty Trade, which is another one based in Chicago. And this is for options only. So take a product or a derivative like options, fairly complicated, you would think, and set up a site where it's accessible to the everyday person. They have video tutorials that make options trading seem like a pretty basic activity. And it's real people like this woman just telling you how to trade options. Fascinating. This is my favorite, again, out of Sweden. This site, Shareville, is part of Nordnet, the largest online bank there. And this has caused literally a revolution among younger Swedish women. They have really decided that they want to be equal to the dudes, as they told me, and that they want equal access to trading stocks. So again, you can set up your own portfolio here. You can share your portfolio. They have Facebook communities, as we were talking about earlier, and where they will talk about stocks, all different categories of stocks, any information available in a community. And then they have social media influencers. So women who've had portfolios that have done particularly well will get people tracking and following, and you can just build the same portfolio. This is a woman, Sandra Lindquist, that I met. I was at NASDAQ giving a talk, and they wanted me to say, everybody, start investing if you haven't started tonight. So at the end, I challenged everybody to go and buy a stock, and I said, buy something. If you haven't started investing, buy a company that you normally do business with. So if you buy a lot of Apple products, buy Apple stock, buy something, because if you're interested and you're already doing business with the company, you'll be more likely to follow the stock. And the point is, if you're interested, then you'll buy the stock, sell the stock, get practice, and that's what's great about those online platforms. So this woman was sitting there and she said, okay, I'll start investing, and I want to invest in gender equality, a fund. And this was 2015, and she couldn't find any gender equality funds. So Sandra decided, okay, I'll do my own research, And she spent a lot of time looking on company websites to find out the percentage of women on the management teams and on the boards. And she ended up finding 10 companies that were gender equal in Sweden. And so she put together her own portfolio of 10 companies. And she kept her track record. And it ended up being an excellent track record that outperformed the S&P 500 over a 2-year period. Just her little portfolio of 10 gender equal companies. So what happened because of social media is Sandra kept tweeting and posting her monthly returns outperforming the S&P with her little portfolio. And Business Insider magazine actually found out about this and put her on the cover and said the Swedish amateur who is beating the market with her feminist approach to stock picking. And she's still at it today. And a lot of people want to buy her track record now. And of course now there are gender equality funds. And so it'd be nice if they had a longer track record. So she's become, and she was never an investor until that day. She's an industrial engineer, so it's quite interesting. Without social media, that would never have happened. This is my last slide, and then we can have a chat and have a conversation with you. This is what I was talking with Jeffrey about a little bit earlier. I'm pretty sure this is a chart of percentage of women CFA Institute. I think it includes candidates as well as charter holders. But the point is that Taiwan is relatively quite high at 31%, so congratulations. The global average is way lower than that. I mean, this is like, I'm going to be in Vietnam next week. They're the highest. And I've been in Romania. But this is like way higher than anywhere around the world. So I'd be very interested in hearing what the secret of success is here in attracting so many female candidates and female charter holders. But I think that's awesome. And so I will close with this. Please do connect with me if you're interested in the topic. I post a lot of stuff. I write for 3 different publications, and I post my annual research. And I'm also just interested in continuing the conversation. So if any of you have ideas on what you think I should research or questions I should ask these women around the world, I'm very open to that. And I love it. People send me research that I haven't seen, so it can be a back and forth. And I would very much love to keep in touch with Taiwan and you guys. So thank you so much for your attention.